Yeah, I mean, your question's interesting to me. I'm thinking about it. I'm pondering it a little further. I think that by showing a thorough critique of this individual broadcast, you can probably conclude in the end with some reflections about the state of journalism in our country or in the world or in certain forms of partisan media. Um, so I think it would be nice to add your conclusions at the end, but you don't have to make the whole thing that expansive in scope. I think even just a simple few statements at the end to summarize would be sufficient. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. It's 12:45. It's good to be here with you guys again, as always. Um, Today we have another key meeting because it is, I'm sure that you can't get into all the details. So, like I say, you're going to have to pick and choose a little bit. But it's probably a good problem to have because, Gabriel, a lot of people, when they do this assignment, for whatever reason, they hesitate to, choose a highly partisan news source. And so they'll just report on, like, say, the local news. And they actually struggle to find enough examples of, like, bad information, fallacies, or framing of the issues. So I would rather have your problem than that problem because having a wealth of things to choose from is better than having not enough and just basically saying the news was good and accurate and I liked it. So there's no real critique in that case. Points to be critical. So you should have, I think, a successful assignment from that. Just narrow it down, kind of eliminate some of it. You probably don't have to be exhausted in that case. Yes. Single or double spaced? My thought was double spaced. But I'm not going to be picky about that at all. So if somebody really wanted to have more content and they made it single spaced, that'd be fine, but it's only required as double spaced. Yes. Okay. 2 pages of single is fine, Gabriel. Like I say, I'm not a stickler on this, and I think that makes perfect sense considering how much stuff you want to talk about. Okay. So, all right, everyone, let's continue. We have an important meeting today because we're starting to kick off these 2 review sessions. So about the assignment that I've been hearing some questions on, everybody don't forget that's due anytime today before midnight. Just email me your submission and then it'll be in on time. Some of you've already done it and that's fine. But to anybody that's still working on finishing theirs up, just try to get it into me before the end of the day. And other than that, all of our other material has been graded. So people that are interested in their scores can seek it out from me anytime. And we're getting ready for the final exam. That's the only thing after your homework today that you turn in. So next week on Thursday, the 16th, a week from today, that's when you'll take your final test. But between now and then, we have a little work still to do. Today, we're going to try and go over information on the study guide. So some of you guys noticed that I mailed out the study guide. Let me make sure that you can confirm that. I know there was like some Canvas outages. It was very actually hard to mail it at first. Because I was doing it while there were intermittent outages, but I double and triple checked and I noticed that it went through. Okay, good. So you got it. If you got it, everybody got it. So if you haven't yet had a chance to, please make sure to pull that up and review the document. You can just view, print, download, or whatever so that you can use that for your own study. And we're going to work together on at least half of it today. So 2 review sessions, a big study guide. Me and your classmates and you yourself, we're going to all help each other to come up with the right content and information for most all of these questions. So I'd like us to try and have the students mostly involved on this. When we do review sessions, that's always my method, and it's the same as the midterm review session. So I want you guys, for the most part, to try and supply the info that's needed to answer whatever question it is, but I'll make sure to help. I'll be here to intervene whenever I think I need to clarify something, add details, correct any misunderstandings. So that's how we're going to run this. What I'll do right now is I'm going to pull up the study guide on the shared screen, and then we can all just review it and see it at the same time. So 1 second while I get that going. And feel free, anybody that's here, to leave a comment so that you have your attendance recorded just as a formality to make sure that I have those records. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's see here. Is my screen visible to everybody that's watching? Let me know. Okay, good. So you're looking at the shared screen, and over here on the left side, I've got the study guide pulled up. So we're just going to look at this and go over as much material as we can. Sorry, I'm going to move this away from the chat. So good. Thank you, guys. Okay, cool. No, YouTube does not see the shared screen, Sky, but I'm talking through it as we go over the questions. So you'll be able to also, why don't you just pull up your own on a separate window if you need to? Um, I know YouTube doesn't have a shared screen, but this is a day where Zoom comes in handy because we all want to focus on the questions. Nonetheless, you don't necessarily need to be viewing it on Zoom because whenever a question is asked, you'll hear me talk about it and you'll have that context. Okay, yeah, either way is fine. Okay, thank you guys. So let's go ahead and begin. And okay, let's try and make it lightning round. If we get through it fast, then maybe we'll end our class a little early. I don't know. It depends on how much time we take. But anyway, we're looking at the second half of the study guide today. We'll do the first half on Tuesday. You can anticipate what the next question I'm going to ask is if you're looking at the list. So the faster that you're able to retrieve the info and just put it into the chat, then we can quickly comment on it and move on to the next. So let's just get it started, everyone. If you're ready to go, I'm asking you this. What's a fallacy? That's a question that we should be able to say. What's the answer? What is a fallacy? Okay, perfect, Alan. Thank you. It is when an argument contains a logical error or a flaw. When an argument contains a logical error or flaw, that's a fallacy. Not all arguments are good. Some of them are bad. And the word that describes a bad argument that's got errors in it is fallacy. Over the generations, we've identified and labeled different types of fallacies, different individual fallacies. And knowing what they are allows us to both avoid committing them on our own and to recognize it when other people do it so that we don't fall prey to poor and misleading arguments. Okay, so flawed and erroneous arguments, that's fallacies. Now, one category of fallacy is fallacy of ambiguity. Let me know what that is. What is a fallacy of ambiguity then? What type of fallacy is that? Just got to sort of name the flaw. Okay, yeah, thank you, Dalton. When an argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or maybe just a confusion between two similar but different concepts. Yes. When arguments contain those type of errors or flaws, we define them as fallacies of ambiguity. Now, inside the scope of that definition, fallacy of ambiguity, there are a number of different particular fallacies of ambiguity. So starting with equivocation, who knows what is equivocation? What do you think? Thanks, Armand. Yes, when a key term in an argument is used more than once, but the definition changes. Yeah. I think I gave example in the class just when I first taught you this, that say that we use the word bank twice and we switch the meaning of bank halfway through. So John's at the bank and banks lend you money. So John is at a place where they lend money. But if we use bank in the first premise to indicate a edge of the river, like a riverbank, and in the second premise we use it to indicate a actual like financial bank, then the conclusion wouldn't follow through because the usage of the word is different in the two places where it appears in the argument. So you got to make sure to use words in a standard uniform way throughout. Okay, what's amphiboly? There you go. Thanks, Armand. It's when an argument has a grammatical error and the grammatical error allows for more than one conclusion to be drawn. Yes. Sometimes this happens when we are not sure to whom a pronoun refers in a given statement or argument. Like if I say my friends went to watch the football team, but they weren't doing too well. Now, in that case, they, the pronoun, the plural pronoun, could refer to my friends that watched the game and just they didn't do well. Or it could refer to the team that they're watching that didn't do very well. So my friends went and attended the game, the football team, but they weren't having a good time. Maybe a better example. So who knows what they refers to until we disambiguate the grammar. Or John and Paul were sitting around and talking about one of his songs. We don't know which one of those two we're talking about if we just say he or his, because there's two different male subjects named. Okay, so then there's fallacy of accent. What is the fallacy of accent? Thank you, Kay. The meaning of an argument or a statement changes based upon what word in there is either emphasized or accented. So, child burns down the house, mother sees this, is upset, says, why did you do this after I told you never play with matches? Child says it in this weird way. Oh, I know, Mom, but the thing is I wasn't playing with matches. I was just, setting fire to things real serious like. So they accent or emphasize the word playing, and that kind of transforms the intended meaning given by the rule, which is not to even use the matches, not merely to use them as long as it's not something that can be called a game. Okay, next there's division. What's the division fallacy? Yeah, so a person incorrectly infers that a member of the group has the same features as the whole. Or yes, that's a fine way to put it. A person makes an incorrect inference that um, each member of a group has a quality that the whole group has. So it's reasoning from the whole to each part, but not always does the whole have a feature that every single part also has. The United States is very wealthy and rich, and you're a citizen, so you're rich. That does not follow. Obviously, you can have a system that you're a part of which has massive wealth without every part of the system being wealthy itself. Or the, let's see, uh, division. The football team is um, the football team are losers. You know, that's they got the worst record in the league. So the best player is a bad player. You know, that's not necessarily true. You can have a bad team with a good player, or vice versa, a good team with a bad player. Okay, so division. My family is very loud, and therefore I am loud. But that doesn't follow because there can always be a member of a group that doesn't exhibit the features that the group as a whole exhibits. Um, Next, composition. What's composition? It's another incorrect inference. It's kind of the opposite of division, but you can say more. What is this composition fallacy? And Armand, the only thing I would say about the way you defined it, it's a small point, but not just a member, but each member, like all members. Nonetheless, what's composition, guys? Come on, we slowing down? Not to worry, thank you. Okay, Armand. When a person mistakenly infers that a characteristic of a member of a group is the whole is taken to be like the parts. So you kind of have a typo there, I believe, but you sort of were getting to the right point. Midway through, you kind of had an error. So it's when an incorrect inference is made that because a member of a group has a feature, that the whole group has the same feature. And so it's reasoning from the part to the whole instead of from the whole to the part. So like composing up the whole out of each part. Yeah, so I have a PhD, therefore my family is highly educated, which is not true at all. The cells in my body, or let's say the atoms that form my body, cannot be seen without a microscope. So I cannot be seen without a microscope. And certainly that doesn't follow. So just because the individual parts have certain features, that doesn't mean that the whole thing that they form together or compose has the same. Sodium and chloride individually are very toxic to humans. So sodium chloride, the compound, is highly toxic to humans. But that's false because sodium chloride is just a scientific name for table salt, which is a common staple of everyone's diet. So, but the individual elements, sorry, by themselves are highly unstable and dangerous. So anyway, composition. And Sky, thank you. You have the right definition. A person believes that a characteristic of an individual is a characteristic of the whole group, but it's an erroneous inference. Okay. What is a fallacy of relevance? This is the second category. All right, Alan, thanks. When one or more of the premises of the argument is not relevant or is just unrelated to the conclusion. Perfect, yeah. With arguments, premises are supposed to be the evidence that backs the conclusion. But if the premises don't even have anything to do with the conclusion, then certainly it's a fallacy. Now, there are different types of fallacies of accent, or different, I guess, examples of it. Sorry, I meant to say relevance. What am I saying? There are different types of fallacies of relevance. What's the first one? Ad hominem. What is ad hominem? Some call it personal attack. Let me know the definition. So this is when you what? You attack the speaker instead of giving a logical counter response. Yes. So instead of challenging their argument or their evidence, you make a personal attack. Somebody says, you know, I think that we have to shut down certain businesses for the pandemic because we can't have people meeting in these big public spaces when we have a deadly virus going around. And then somebody says to them, no, that's totally wrong. And the reason you're saying that is simply because you don't have a job. So you don't even care about whether it's shut down or not. Now, see how that got personal? I mean, if you really didn't agree that they had a wise argument, then you should be able to point out what's wrong with the argument. But by making it about them, you make the personal attack, and that's a fallacy. Armand, example, global warming is real. Oh, I think you're totally wrong. Your family's full of bad people, so I can't believe you. Right. Someone says they think global warming is real. Maybe they give you evidence that justifies that claim. And you say, oh, yeah, but I mean, doesn't your dad have a criminal record? How can I even listen to anything you're saying? That's not relevant. It's a personal attack, and it doesn't show that their argument was wrong. So, look, just as a reminder, if you don't like what someone concludes or what they're arguing, you have to find fault with the argument itself. It really doesn't matter who it is that made the argument. So their circumstances, their identity, what they're like is not the point. The point is whether their argument is correct or incorrect. It's like I sometimes think of it like this: pretend this argument you just found it on a piece of paper that just floated down from the sky. It doesn't have to be about the individual who is the source of the argument. Um, or if you want to make arguments about a person, then that would be the topic. Otherwise, it's irrelevant. Okay, next. Appeal to force, or some call it the scare tactic fallacy. What's this? Thanks, Kay. So it's when you use or you threaten to use force to try to get another person to back down, accept your argument or position. If you had a boss and the boss said, look, I don't think that you should vote for that person if you want to work here. Do you get what I'm saying? Or if your parents say, I'm sick of you talking about this global warming stuff, that stuff's all BS. And, if you want to like stay in this house, then I think you need to change your views. When you get people to change their opinions just because they're scared, because you're intimidating them or threatening them, that's not rational. The only rational basis to change your mind is because you appreciate the reasons that have been given for something. But if anybody says like my way or the highway, believe this or else, that's a scare tactic. It's not supposed to be that you are intimidated into believing it, but that you've been convinced through the reasons that have been given. Okay. Next, appeal to pity. Some call it appeal to emotion or sympathy, but let's just go with appeal to pity as it's called in the book. What is it? You invoke feelings of sympathy or pity to yourself to sort of support your argument or claim. Yeah, so police officer pulls you over, speeding. You say, sorry, officer, but can't you just give me a warning or let me go because it's finals week and I'm so stressed out, studying for these tests. There you go. If I don't get an A on this paper, I won't be able to transfer. Please give me that A. Yeah, but the grade has to be based on merit, not just based on me feeling sorry for you. People will say stuff like that. They'll say, please, I need this grade because if I don't get it, my parents are going to be so mad at me and we're already on thin ice. But I'm not really supposed to consider those factors. We just have to look at the content itself. Pity has its place in life, but it shouldn't be the thing that you rely on to win arguments or to get special treatment. Okay, popular appeal, what's this? Appeal to popular opinion to support your conclusion, yes. So just because something's popular or the majority of people like it doesn't mean it's true or correct. The majority can sometimes be wrong. So you shouldn't be making an argument like this. This is the best movie because it's number one at the box office. Or, most people believe in this policy, so it's the right policy. If something's true or good, they should be able to argue for it on independent grounds. You should be able to say why it deserves the popularity that it has achieved. So the mere citation of something's popularity is not a winning argument. That doesn't necessarily establish its value or accuracy or correctness. Okay. What about, like sometimes people will say, oh, majority of parents feel this way, so that's a good school policy. Oh, you've already got it, Armand. Yeah, so you're on the same page as me. Most parents believe there should be no standardized testing to admit students into schools. Therefore, because all of them believe that, it must be a good thing. Yeah, but there's a lot of education experts that have a different view, and maybe they're in the minority of opinion just because they're that educated and elite. So not everyone has their training, but the common person's opinion can sometimes be wrong. Like if you take a survey of people's opinion in a certain community, they may have unscientific attitudes, they may have immoral attitudes, they may have racist or nationalistic attitudes, and it just depends on the case. But what's popular is not always true. At one time, it was a popular cause to believe that people should be enslaved, or that maybe women don't have the same mental acuity to be able to make voting decisions or whatever, or to take on certain professions. So anyway, some good examples. Next, let's go with the appeal to ignorance. If you know what it is, let me know. What's the appeal to ignorance? Thanks again, Kay. So it's making a universal. No, sorry. You skipped ahead one. We'll get to that, but you've given two different definitions at the same time. So it's a little confusing because your first thing is about hasty generalization. Um, the second thing, though, you put is almost kind of a hybrid of the two. So we got to get clear. We'll take hasty generalization in a minute. Let's just take it in the same order, though. Go over appeal to ignorance first. Okay, thank you. So someone believes that something is true. Oh, no, it's fine. Someone believes something is true just because it's not yet been proven false. As if I could sit here and tell you there has to be Bigfoot because no one's really shown that there's no such thing. Or I believe that there's aliens somewhere in outer space because I've not been able to see proof otherwise. When you make a claim, there's this thing called burden of proof. When you make a claim, you're the one that's supposed to have your own proof. You're not supposed to say to other people, prove me wrong, and if you can't, then I'm correct. You have to have evidence that shows what you're saying is true. So if you just point to the lack of contrary evidence, you're not actually justifying what you said. Like if we say, look, to this other country, like Iran or something, you're building nuclear weapons, and that's what we believe. And if you can't prove that you're not, then that's what we assume. You need to have real evidence that these weapon systems are being developed, and you can't just say that we assume true until proven otherwise. The only exception to that is in like courts of law, where we grant a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But we do that because of the value we have in our system, which says that it's a worse injustice for an innocent person to be condemned than for a guilty person to go free. So we really make the state take on the heavier burden of proof, not the defendant. Okay, yeah, that's right. And that's all correct, Armand, and another good example. Okay, so it's hasty generalization. Now we can say what it is, Kay, or anybody else. I notice a few of you guys are heavily involved, but there's a lot of participants watching. So get in the game and don't just sit on the sidelines letting others do your work. What is the hasty generalization? Dalton, thank you. You make a universal claim based on a sample that's either too small or it's just a skewed, biased, non-representative sample. So someone says, most of my friends are politically fill in the blank, liberal, conservative, and therefore I think that's the way most college students are. But maybe your own self-selected friend group isn't representative of the larger composition of people's opinions. Or, my friend's dog bit me one time, and ever since then I've come to the conclusion, dogs, they're just brutal, they're vicious animals. I would never have a dog. But based off of one example, it might not be enough evidence to make this general conclusion. So hasty generalization is when you too quickly jump to a broad, sweeping general conclusion off of just a small number of cases or a non-representative set of cases. So I'm looking at the thing. Okay, straw man. What is straw man? Oh, there you go. Thanks, Madeline. So, and same to you, Alan. A person, well, misrepresents would be the word to put in there, Alan, just a slight edit. One misrepresents or distorts their opponent's argument, and to make it seem easier to refute, to rebut. So, like, suppose that someone made an argument which says, based on my analysis, a physical barrier like building a border wall would not actually be the most effective way to prevent drug trafficking and illegal migration. So therefore, I think it's a financially inefficient use of funding. What do you say to that? And somebody says, oh, okay, what? I mean, you're saying that we shouldn't even have a border. So what, we should just let all people in no matter what, and that's going to overrun our system. We're going to be swamped. And that's just crazy. So I can't agree with you. But that's false because the person didn't say that. They didn't say, let's have no border system or immigration controls. They just didn't agree with one policy solution to getting that result, which was the building of a physical barrier. On the other hand, yes, that's right, Catherine, kind of like putting words in someone's mouth. We can imagine an argument from the other side. So for balance, imagine somebody says, we need stronger immigration measures than what we have right now. The flow of human beings from distant shores, but also crime, drugs, et cetera. It's too much. We got to stop that. And then what if somebody says, okay, so you're saying we should shut down all immigration? What? But isn't this a nation of immigrants? Haven't you seen the Statue of Liberty? Give us your poor, tired, huddled masses. How is that consistent with your stance that we should not have any people admitted to the country? So that's crazy. But in this case, they've overhyped the other person's view as saying, let's eliminate immigration, whereas they just thought we should have more strict controls. On the other end, somebody has over exaggerated the opposite view by saying there should be no controls at all, when in fact they just thought they didn't agree with one policy method. So this happens a lot. You see it in political arguments, people going back and forth on social media, characterizing their opponent with a view that's really an exaggerated or maybe oversimplified version of their own view. Oftentimes, it'll be a more radical way of looking at the view. Like someone says, "Hey, um, I just think that the way that we have animals treated in factory farms is inhumane. We should really change those practices." And then somebody says, "Okay, what? So we should just get rid of all meat? So we all got to convert to veganism?" That's pretty out there. But maybe the person didn't even say that. They just thought that we should have, greater, you know, agricultural production methods that show some respect to the animals and don't like confine them in tiny boxes or whatever. So I'm just giving examples. Okay. Yes. So then to the next, it's red herring. What's the red herring? Perfect. So someone tries to sidetrack an argument and they're trying to bring up a different topic that's not even on the same subject. It's irrelevant to the topic. So if I say to somebody, global warming is a huge problem. Don't you see these greenhouse gases are collecting in the atmosphere and causing the planet to rise in its temperature? And somebody says no, because what? Terrorism is the real problem. Don't tell me about global warming. Let's talk about terrorism. But it's a different problem. It's not related to the first problem. So how can you really just say, I disagree with you because blah, blah, blah. Here's something completely different. Thank you, Sky. Correct. When you try to distract the argument by bringing up an unrelated topic. You've cheated on somebody and they call you out and they're like, I thought I knew you. I thought you were a good guy or you're a good lady. But instead you're going behind my back cheating. And they say, come on, here's the problem. Don't complain about cheating. Don't you know some people, they get into domestic violence and they actually hit their spouse or their partner? I'm not doing that. So what's the problem? But it's a red herring. That's not the question. That's not the issue. Just because there's other things that could have happened that might have been even worse, that doesn't excuse this bad behavior. So red herring, distraction, sidetracking to another topic. Okay, we have one more category of fallacies, which are the fallacies of unwarranted assumption. So let's know what those are overall. There you go. Thanks, Alan. So it's when there's an argument that includes an assumption, but it's not supported by the evidence that you actually have. And it would be, I guess, a threatening thing for a person to actually say in the context of a relationship. I don't know. I have to sort of come up with some of these off the top of my head, but you would know that if a person tried to change the topic from the question of cheating to the question of other bad behavior in a relationship, that they're just trying to evade personal responsibility, and evading the topic is what the red herring does. Okay, but yeah, so when you make arguments, you shouldn't use unsupported claims. You shouldn't be making claims that you have no evidence to support. So there's a couple of fallacies of unwarranted assumption. First of all, begging the question. What's that? Okay, you have an argument and there's a conclusion, but one of the premises just rewords the conclusion. That's right. Arguments are supposed to be attempts to support a conclusion, but it can't support itself. Exactly. Very good. If I tell you America's the best country in the world, and you're like, well, what's your argument? And I say, oh, why is it the best? Because we're superior to everybody. That's not a argument that has another piece of information to justify the conclusion, because saying it's the best because it's superior to everything is just saying it's the best because it's the best. You need to give reasons, which I guess you could give. You could say it's our constitutional framework, it is our massive military power or wealth. But if you just say we're the best because nobody's better, you haven't given a real argument. You're just repeating yourself. If somebody says, abortion's wrong because it's evil to end a pregnancy, they aren't saying why they think it's wrong, because they're just saying it's wrong because it's really wrong. Just because, basically. That's right, Catherine. Yeah. Little kids say that, because, and they just leave it at that. But we all know that they haven't offered any reasons when they say those things. And people, even when they're not children, very, mature adults, they still fall into these habits of mind. My team is the best team because, come on, man, we've got all the greatest players. Maybe that's actually not fully circular. I guess it's kind of a different claim, but our players are the best because these guys, they're amazing, or something like that. People, they say more words, but if you really analyze the meaning of the words, there's no information given. Because I said so. Yeah, because I said so, I guess could be like, well, because I offer testimony, then you have to follow it. But you want to know why the statement is one that should be relied on. So yes, it's a fair case too. Okay, good. And you do have to have criteria to evaluate any topic. So moving to inappropriate appeal to authority. What's this? We try to gain support for our claim, but by doing what? It's, inappropriate appeal to authority. This one's throwing you off? No? Let me know. Citing a figure who has no authority on the topic. That's right. So you're trying to support your claim by referring to the view of some so-called authority, but the problem is this person's not at all knowledgeable on the topic. So, people thinking that they have knowledge about vaccines and they're not health experts or scientists. That'd be a classic example that we're seeing a lot right now. A car doctor, mechanic to help you with your body problems, sure. I was just hanging out with my friend who's, let's say, a librarian, and they were trying to tell me that it's time to invest in this crypto stuff. So I really ought to do that. I think it's the time to get in the market. But you're not talking to a financial analyst. Yeah, to the moon, sure, diamond hands. So when you talk about the person's views, if you're going to use that as evidence, it should be somebody who's authoritative and knowledgeable. Because it doesn't matter if your plumber or whoever said that vaccines don't work, because that's not the right kind of person to cite as an authority. Now, if you have a real authority on the topic, maybe you could make a case. But I find it interesting that a lot of times people trust their own feelings and intuitions, even though they have experts that they could defer to. Reminds you, Catherine, of these MLM schemes selling natural essential oils to cure diseases. Yes, people will say there's a celebrity that endorses this product and they claim that it has these medical or therapeutic benefits, but the celebrity isn't the person who really has knowledge about whether it has these properties or not. Okay, good. What's a loaded question? Anybody? Yeah, so it is asking a question which assumes something that you don't know pretty much. How about this? What if somebody asks a guy, who's your girlfriend? What's loaded about that? Or how could it be considered a loaded question? Tell me, who's your girlfriend right now? Okay, one thing is it's assuming the person is heterosexual, right? But it's also assuming that they're in a relationship. So it's kind of like double loaded. It's loaded in the sense that we don't know their relationship status, but we also don't know their orientation. So you might be assuming two things when you ask that question. Anybody have any other examples of these? Sometimes assumes they're straight and in a relationship. Good, Sky, you got it. Anything you can throw out there for me? Somebody asks, what car do you drive? Sure. Where do you work? In New York City. That's funny. Yeah. People don't necessarily have to drive over there. Armand, me and you, maybe is it just me? But after a car accident, I started thinking how nice it would be to live in New York in a way. So we could have no stress and just ride around on cabs, subways. What college did you graduate from? Yes, that's another one. Maybe the person hasn't attended college or at least hasn't graduated. When is the baby due? That's a tough one. Yes, if the person's not pregnant, it's definitely a bad assumption to make without knowing more. So anyway, everybody, these are all fair examples. I guess we can say that we understand. Don't ask questions when you don't already understand or know the facts that you're asking about. Don't make assumptions and then have to apologize for a rude or perhaps offensive question in some cases. Okay, so what's next is false dilemma. What's the false dilemma? Complex issue, but it gets oversimplified to some simple two-way binary choice, black or white. That's all correct, yeah. So, how about this? Yeah, it's kind of like you're with us or against us. Your neighbor comes over and says, patriots that love this country, they have a flag in their yard, but the people that don't, they hate the nation. They don't like this country. So I haven't seen a flag in your yard. So what's up? You don't like America? Isn't it a false dilemma though? Because it's not like there's only these two extreme options. You'd proudly display the patriotic flag, or you just are a hater of America. I mean, there's a lot of people that might find it a little bit ostentatious or perhaps self-aggrandizing to display the flag, but they love their country anyway, or maybe they're just ambivalent between the two standpoints. So that's a false dilemma. Um, what if somebody's asking you, "Do you love me or do you hate me? What's your feeling?" Because it's got to be one. I haven't seen you showing any love, so I think you must hate me. It's a false dilemma again because it's two extreme choices, but there's obviously a whole gray area in between. Um, Somebody says to you that you're either like a hardcore leftist or a right-wing conservative, um, but I haven't seen you like looking at media sources from the right, so you must be really far to the left. Obviously, there's always the possibility to be unaffiliated or moderate, whatever. So, false dilemma. People get caught up in all or nothing thinking, binary thinking. They don't like to think of the shades of gray or the subtlety. So, when people ask you all or nothing questions, try to put you on the spot, you have to sometimes call out the false dilemma. Okay, so then we have questionable cause. What's this? Yeah, someone assumes one thing causes another, but they don't have good evidence for it. So, that's important to mention too. Um, Superstitions could be a case, right? So black cat crosses your path and you get into a car accident, let's say, and you go back in your mind and you're like, you know what? I think maybe that caused it. But after all, there's no logical connection whatsoever between the completely two unrelated events. Or if there was, then we should see a reliable connection between them over time, which we don't. Someone got sick, therefore that bad weather caused the illness. I mean, it's not impossible, I guess, for bad weather to cause an illness. Say they were out in the cold for a long time, but without more evidence, I suppose it could be a questionable cause at best. Um, People like to think in terms of cause and effect. They like to draw connections between things, but don't be so quick to just assess something as the cause of a later outcome. Certainly, it's not enough just because one thing happens first that it's the cause of something that happens later. Um, yeah, so I mean, I got in this little accident on Monday, like I think I told you guys. What if I go back in my mind? I'm like, what caused it? What caused it? Well, I dismissed class 5 minutes early. And because I dismissed class 5 minutes early, that meant that I was in the exact place and time where I was when the accident happened. Maybe if I had left 5 minutes later, then I wouldn't have had the accident. I don't know. In a weird metaphysical sense, that might actually be true. But the point I'm making, though, is unless you have clear evidence that something is like a connected result to some prior event, you shouldn't just assess it as a cause. Okay, what is the slippery slope fallacy? You say it this way, Armand, when your arguments set precedents for something radical, but we have to keep in mind that that this is not a reasonable thing. So that's right, Madeline. It's an incorrect idea that if one type of action is taken or allowed, then eventually all actions of that type will be taken or allowed. And it's typically claimed that it's going to be like compounding towards the negative, worse and worse actions of that kind. So, you're going to let your kids stay out a little later tonight, and that's not a good idea because once they get that little taste of freedom, they're gone. They're going to completely disobey you, defy you. You'll never be able to control them again, and they'll just end up a criminal with no ability to follow rules. Probably not, though. So if you give a mouse a cookie, then he wants to have the whole box. Then he wants to have the room that it's in. Then he wants to have the house. Yeah. Slippery slope. If we have a policy that approves of gays in the military, it seems innocent enough at first, but it puts us on a slippery slope towards foreign invasion and capture of our military because our fighting forces lose their unit cohesion. Maybe somebody says that if we start developing artificial intelligence, like we have these artificially intelligent robots and cyborgs, then that's going to eventually cause the destruction of mankind when evil robots want to take over the planet. So anyway, slippery slope. You need better evidence to make a robust prediction of a negative sequence of events. So if it's not well based on evidence, then it's an unwarranted assumption, this slippery slope idea. Okay, finally, there's naturalistic fallacy, and that's the idea that, yeah, so anything natural must be good. You kind of didn't put the normative claim, though, Armand. Natural things, you say, shouldn't be interfered with, but there's just kind of this respect and reverence for the natural in the fallacy. People think that it's all good. And in tandem with that, they say that what's bad? Oh, you said it above. Okay, I see it now. Anything natural is good, anything unnatural is bad. So, person says, I'm not going to take certain medical treatments because they were developed in labs and they don't come from, Mother Nature. Or I'm going to have no problem with people that, use cocaine, maybe marijuana, because those come from plants. That was given to us by God. So it's got to be a good thing. Look, some things that are natural are good, some things that are natural are bad. And with the unnatural, there could be good unnatural things or bad. It depends on the case. So we can't just make the easy assumption that whatever we label as natural must be a good thing. Um, if you had cancer and the best course of treatment was to get chemotherapy or radiation, and you said, no, I want like a homeopathic treatment because I think that's unnatural, then you're going to be making a mistake because it might be your only best chance to get into remission. Magic mushrooms good, COVID vaccine bad, yes, but maybe the virus is good itself, Foster. It doesn't that come from nature? Shouldn't we maybe just get sick with the virus like God wanted us to, and just deal with our natural immune system? Natural immunity, isn't that better than lab produced immunity? Anyway, these are all BS arguments, but you hear these things, and people are caught up in a fallacious way of thinking. The whole idea that people have too of the natural and the unnatural, it's not very clearly defined. How do you distinguish the two things? Yeah. Anyway, we could say more and more, but there you go. So next up, the media questions. There's just a few of them because I had a couple of different homework assignments on it, and there wasn't a lot of clear definitions that I wanted to sort of enforce on that. But media literacy, it's the ability to understand the influence of media on you. What is product placement? It's when the advertiser places the product and puts it where? You remember that one? We're getting products and services and they're actually appearing where? In the program or movie itself, not during like the official intermissions or advertising breaks. Yeah, so you're seeing characters drinking Coca-Cola, wearing Nikes, using Apple laptops in the movie. That's all done on the basis of licensing agreements between the broadcaster of the media and or the producer of it, and then the vendor of the service or product. So they're advertising to us in some of these media productions, and they're doing it in a way that we can't easily avoid, as we might, skip past ads or mute them, or TiVo and get rid of having to watch them in that way. Okay, now 3 different main purposes of ads. Oh, you're asking, Kay, would it work if it was in a book? I don't know about that. I think in books, it's a form of media, yes, but or comic books, it's possible. I can't rule it out, but I think a lot of times people are more likely to do so in like visual media. Comic books are visual media; they're little graphic novels in a way. So he was wearing Nike Jordans as he walked into the ballroom. Yeah, see, the thing is, some of these things are just like the stuff of our collective consciousness. So we're bound to refer to products, labels, and sponsors in the written word. But when they appear on screen, it's definitely on the basis of licensing agreements. I'm not 100% committed to the idea that it's always seen in works of literature or fiction, but I guess it's something that can't be ruled out either, depending on the case. When it comes to ads, there's different purposes that they have. One of the main purposes of ads is just to, what? Do you remember any of those? Product awareness, right. So create awareness about the product or service. Just remind people that it exists. Another purpose is the more traditional, which is when you try to provide information about the product or service to the consumer. And then the third is to just generate consumer demand. So if you saw an ad that just had like the Nike swoosh and that was it, that's not making an argument to you about what their product is or about their new shoe or something and why it's a good shoe. It's just product awareness. Like remember the logo, remember the brand. If you saw a commercial though for like say new Nike running shoes and they tell you about the foam in the shoes and they tell you about the spring action that kind of propels you off of the ground when you take a stride. Now they're trying to convince you about the desirability of the product or service, and that's the more traditional second purpose. And another purpose is to just create consumer demand, which is sometimes done without referring to the product or service's own virtues. So it would be like making it look sexy, cool, fun, showing people having the time of their life on the beach while they're drinking cans of Coke. So it makes it kind of gives it this aura or allure that makes it desirable to the consumer for other perhaps emotional reasons. And in some cases, I don't know, like a contest or sweepstakes could be attached to the purchase of the product, which also drives up interest in it, but not necessarily by reference to the features of the product. Okay, so we're being advertised to all the time. People want to basically get us to spend our money on their goods and services. And being able to think critically about advertisements can make you a more wise consumer and better steward of your own self-interest. So we are now going to chapter 12, all this stuff about science. So science contains different assumptions. One is the assumption of unity. With this assumption, we think that the universe could eventually be explained according to a single set of scientific laws. So everything should be able to be explained according to one set of laws. We haven't quite got there yet, because right now we have quantum physics to describe small scales of reality and relativity to describe the larger scales. But scientists believe that since there's just one universe and it's a closed physical system, that it should be eventually capable of explanation according to one elegant set of laws. Limitations of science. So there's a few of these philosophical limitations of science that the book mentions that we talked about. One of them is that science assumes what? Anybody know one of these? Just help me out a little bit with that. It assumes that something exists, which we can't necessarily prove. Does this jog your memory a little bit? Well, okay, there's that too, Kay. Let me give you, that's reasonable. So science assumes, well, it can only study things which are observable. It can only study things which can be observed. So if there were things that could never be observed, then they would never be capable of scientific understanding. Also, science assumes the existence of a certain thing, a big thing, I guess, or maybe everything. But what is it? Don't slow down now. Come on. Let's pick up speed. Let's go. Science assumes the existence of the blah, blah, blah blank. What is it? Grand unified theory? No, that was the unity one that we already talked about. Material world would be the word. Yeah, existence of the external world. There you go. Thank you, Madeline. Yeah, no worries. So, yeah, science assumes that you're not just dreaming, that this stuff around you is real and it's outside of you and it's been there before you and it'll be there after you. But we can't actually prove that there is an external world. All you have is your own consciousness. And so all you have access to your external world is mediated by your perception. How do you really know this perception is connected to something on the outside? Because, like, for example, when you're dreaming, you think you're in an external environment, but it's all happening in your head. So how do you really know there's an external environment? I guess we can't prove it, but science just goes ahead and assumes that it does exist anyway. Okay, now, so science assumes one thing, that the external world exists. It can only study things that are observable. Also, people criticize sometimes the assumption of predictability, like that the that the natural laws will continue to work the same way forever. David Hume, for example, famous British philosopher of a few centuries ago, he thought that it was not necessarily certain that, for example, gravity will always work because we don't know how the future will be. But anyway, science assumes to the contrary, that these natural laws will continue on evermore in the same way. Okay, so 3 limitations that I mentioned to you just now. The assumption the external world exists, which we can't prove. The belief that in science you can only study that which is observable, and also the predictability assumption can be criticized. Next, the scientific method. The way I put this question is maybe not ideal, but here's what I would tell you. The scientific method is a procedure that we use to try and arrive at testable explanations for the observed facts that we have. Okay, so in science, eventually the goal, the end point, is we have a correct explanation for things that we have observed. Now, what is the how is the 3-tier model of critical thinking similar to the scientific method? So with this one, you're going to have to tell me what are the 3 stages of critical thinking. And let's start with that. 3 stages of critical thinking. Okay, experience, that's the first. Interpretation, that's the second. And then analysis, right. Um, Now, these 3 stages of critical thinking have certain similarities to 3 major parts of the scientific method. The scientific method actually has more than 3 stages, but there's a big 3, and the big 3 stages of the scientific method are roughly comparable to these 3 parts. So, observation, hypothesis, and experiment, that's right. So, let's compare each step one by one. The first step of each, experience or observation, they're similar because in both of them, you're just observing something happening and you're not yet sure why it happens, but you just notice it. The second stage of each is also similar because at interpretation or hypothesis, you for the first time try to give a reasonable guess or explanation of why the thing happened. So that's when you try to form the explanation. And the third step of each are also similar because when you analyze your interpretation, you're considering whether it's the right one. And when you experiment on your hypothesis, that's how you determine if the hypothesis is true. So the third step of each is like an evaluation, as it were, of the explanation that you had at step 2. Okay, so that's how we find out things. That's how we come up with explanations, either scientifically or just informally in everyday life. Next up, the first step of the scientific method they call identify a problem. What is that? If you could say a little bit. You observe the world, right? And you identify some unexplained phenomena, something that you don't know why or how it happened, but you would like to find out. And so the whole goal then becomes to arrive at that explanation of why it happened. So you've identified a problem. Now we're going to the second step, develop an initial hypothesis. What is this one? Okay, good, Armand. You make an educated guess to explain the occurrence of the phenomenon, and it is tentative because you're willing to change the hypothesis or maybe even withdraw it completely, depending on the results of the next steps, the test especially. So you've got your hypothesis. What about the fourth step when you test it? What's that? Yes, so you just basically correct, okay? You conduct an experiment, and the experiment can either confirm or disconfirm the hypothesis, but you're going to test the hypothesis by running an experiment. And the experiment could be done in a real world setting or it could be done in a laboratory setting, depending on the scenario. The last step, what is that? Evaluate hypothesis based on the results of the test. So what do you do? What are the possible outcomes of the test, and what would you do in either case? So we finished the experiment. Now we're looking at the results. Okay, so Armand, if the experiment confirms the hypothesis, then you would publish the results, yes, so other scientists could replicate what you've done. And if your experiment didn't show the hypothesis was true, then you would go back to step 2 and repeat the steps. What is step 2, though, to be specific? A new hypothesis, right. So suppose that I've seen a lot of bees dying off, and sorry, you all right? You got your microphone on over there. Are we all good now? Sorry. Cool. All right, back to this. So what I was saying is, yeah, you thought the bees were dying off. Well, they are dying off, and so you're like interested in the reason why. Maybe you have a hypothesis that it has to do with a certain type of pesticide chemical, a chemical that occurs in a common pesticide formula. So you run experiments with, like, say, samples of bees, introducing them to the agent, and seeing whether or not the predicted result, like that it changes their life cycle or mortality rates, is observed. If you saw the result of the hypothesis, the result of the experiment matches what the hypothesis predicts, then that's confirmation. And so you would say, good, maybe my hypothesis is actually correct. You publish it and see if other people can find the same things. And on the other hand, if you ran that experiment and whatever the variable was made no effect towards these so-called bees, then you would say, I don't think this is the right explanation, so it's time to try another explanation, and just keep doing this until eventually you get confirmation from the experimental results. Okay, so relevance to the problem being studied. It's just one of the basic qualities of a good scientific theory. It should be related to the phenomenon that you're trying to explain, yes. So if someone's trying to explain changing weather patterns by looking at economic data or whatever, those are two separate spheres of information, and they don't have much relevance to each other. So it might not be a good explanation for that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go on to the next. Predictive power. A good scientific theory or hypothesis can be used to do what? It can be used to accurately predict future events. That's right. So take astronomy, the field where we observe the orbit and the motions of objects in space. This field of science issues us with very detailed predictions about the exact time and date of all kinds of events like eclipses or the passing of comets or meteor showers and things like that. And then when those events happen at the exact time and date predicted by the theories, it gives us a good sense that astronomy is in fact a valid form of science. Meteorology is the science of weather and weather patterns. And that's how we are able to form weather forecasts, which for the most part, as you guys know, are generally reliable with a few exceptions. And so as we see the weather forecasts play out just as predicted, it gives us confidence that there's credibility and truth behind the field of meteorology. Okay, so cool. So next we have Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus is an important figure of early Western science. And what was his major discovery? Yeah, he did discover the heliocentric model of the solar system. It replaced the geocentric model. And the heliocentric model is the one, to be specific, where the planets revolve around the sun, sun-centered, heliocentric. That replaced the geocentric model, which was the older view that the Earth was at the center of everything. And it was actually a very revolutionary result for him to discover this because he was pushing back against the church, where the church thought it was totally unorthodox to say that we were not at the center of everything because they believed that God, making us in his image, would have wanted us to have a privileged position in the universe, not just some random, non-central position. So anyway, he discovered this. People were persecuted for saying things that he said, but he's right. And so it shows that science can actually learn about the reality around us using observation. Materialism in science, some call it physicalism, but what is that? It's the view, the belief that what? That you'll let me know. Materialism. Everything in the universe is made out of matter, including even us and our consciousness. So if materialism is true, that means that there's no such thing as a non-physical object. Everything's physical, everything's made out of mass, everything's made out of particles. So in the materialist view of things, you do not have a soul. You are just a brain that's having a consciousness in that body that you are in. And when those things don't function because they're physically destroyed, then there's no more consciousness. So materialism says everything's made out of matter. And one of the more interesting aspects of it is that it says even you're made out of matter, and your thoughts that you're having, there's nothing spiritual or, spooky about it. It's just a brain with neurons and synapses that are firing and that are creating the conscious states that you're experiencing. Okay. It's still, it's fascinating though. Even if materialism is true, it's still totally mysterious how matter can become conscious. Because if the materialist account of the universe is correct, then at the beginning of the universe, there's really just a bunch of inanimate matter. There's matter, and it's just a bunch of atoms that have not even aggregated to form objects yet. And fast forward billions of years, and here we have a classroom, or at least a college course, where we're talking. It's hard to imagine sentience arising from a totally non-living system of matter, but that's what we say in science anyway. Okay, what is science though? It's a process of doing what? Reasoning from what to what? Correct. Reasoning from observable facts to testable explanations for the facts. It reveals reality, which is evidentially based. Yeah. So science starts by just observing things, and then the end point is to get to explanations for the things that we have observed, explanations which could be tested for their accuracy. Now, everybody watching me, and I mean, yes, I'm talking to you, you should try to get engaged. What did I say before? That you're supposed to get engaged. And I don't like it when it's too heavily dependent on a couple of students that are providing the info. Have some confidence in yourself. You know the information, so just report on it. The information's out there. It's in three places. It's in your mind, it's in the book, and it's in your notes. It's also in the lectures, so maybe I should say four. But answer these questions. Okay, so next. Science and religion, people have different views about the connection of the two things, what their relationship is. So we talked about four views. What are they? Some say that science and religion, what's one way they're related? Thank you, Dalton. So some say science takes priority over religion when they don't agree. Gabriel, you say there's contradiction, there isn't, they're about different things. Well, when there's contradiction, that's a little too fast, Gabriel, because there's some that say if they contradict, this is the one that wins out. Others say it's the other one that wins out. And so, right, Foster, some say science is the one that should be deferred to when they don't agree. Some say religion is the one that we should follow when they don't agree. And some say, oh, that's okay, it looks good. Some say that they deal with different topics, so there's no conflict. And then also some say that they're compatible if you just look at them in a certain way. Okay, so I'll just say a few last things about those. Science and religion seem to disagree on a whole host of things. Like, okay, if you follow certain, like, say, religious scriptures, it says that there was a Garden of Eden where the first two human specimens were Adam and Eve. But in science, that's completely false because there was evolution, and it's not like there was a single, set of two people that started the whole human race. Which one's correct? Well, depends on your view. If you're going to defer to science, you'll say this was just a story. It's like a metaphor. If you defer to religion, then you would say the scientists are wrong, and this is like the holy word of God, and it's absolutely true. Other people might say, okay, yeah, another case, Armand, does prayer do anything? If you believe in God and religion, then you'd say, yeah, prayer, God's listening to you. He's going to probably answer your prayers. If you believe there's no such thing as God, or you follow science, then you're going to say these prayers don't do anything. These are just thoughts you're having and you're saying words. Did it take 7 days to create the universe? It says so in Genesis, but according to the scientific accounts of the universe, it's much longer for human beings to take form and so on, billions of years really. Okay, but anyway, some people think that we should defer to one or the other side. And then there's another view, which is that they are dealing with different topics. Some people think that if you're looking at religion, it deals with like the spiritual side of life and morality and our values. And then science deals with physics and cause and effect and material things. But it's hard to kind of hold that view in a way, only because the two things seem at least to talk about a common subject matter a lot of times. Okay, just 1 second here. I don't know. Sometimes it's weird. I get these weird, like passing. I think they're just bots or something, and they'll try to interact on the YouTube channel. But whoever knows who these people are, it's not. I don't think it's people because they'll put in weird pieces of typed like info that don't make any sense. At least not to me. So, whatever world we live in. Okay, and then finally, there's the other view, which is that they're compatible. And if you think they're compatible, then that means that although on the surface they appear to disagree, according to the right interpretation of each, they actually say the same thing. So maybe it was just intended as a metaphor when they said God made it all in 7 days, but it's really 7 days means 15 billion years. Or maybe the Garden of Eden was not intended as a real literal place, but like a figurative description of God's designs on mankind or whatever. So, okay. Now, scientific theory versus hypothesis. Any difference between those two? Yeah, theory is just a very well proven hypothesis. It's been tested, retested, and verified many times. So theories start off as hypotheses, and then they can graduate to the status of a theory when they have gained a lot of experimental verification. Okay, so once it's been verified a lot through repeated tests and experiments, we claim of it that it's a theory, and that's the closest approach to truth that science can make, having theories. Next, so in science, there's these different steps in the method. What about gathering additional information to refine the hypothesis? So after you've started to collect data, you sometimes have to make revisions to the hypothesis, maybe making it more specific or more general, depending on the case. Maybe somebody thought that social media usage was the thing that's driving Gen Z to have higher depression and suicide rates, which does seem to be happening, unfortunately. But maybe as we collect data on the issue and look at the facts, we start to notice that it doesn't seem to be correlated with all forms of social media engagement, but with just specific types of social media websites, like maybe photo sharing sites, which cause people to compare each other. There's been something written about this, that Instagram, for example, is having a negative impact on people's mental health that are very young. Anyway, though, what I'm saying is this hypothesis, which started as just the generic social media is bringing this outcome, got more refined to say that it's a specific form of social media websites. Okay, consistency with established theories. What does that mean? Thank you, Sky. I see that you're holding it down over here on the YouTube chat. I appreciate that. But let me know, with the idea of consistency with established theories, a good scientific hypothesis should not what? It will fit in, it will not contradict the others that have already been proven. Correct. Science is supposed to build on the existing body of knowledge that we've had from before. So it's not supposed to be that a new scientific hypothesis cancels out or disqualifies the things that we've learned before. Yeah, so that's all good. It won't reject the existing theories. Very few exceptions to that, but for the most part, yes, science builds on the existing results and doesn't seek to overturn them. Falsifiability. It's a good thing. It's good when a scientific theory is able to be proven false, because it's only on that basis that it can be tested for whether it's true. See, when you perform tests on a hypothesis, it's not a given that it's going to be verified. The whole point of the test is maybe it will be verified, or if this happens, that will show that it wasn't verified. But if you don't even know how to gain a sense of disconfirmation, like what would make it false, then there's no way to show that the falsification did not happen, and therefore we got confirmation. So unfalsifiable claims are actually not scientific. Like the predictions of the astrologist, there's no way that they could claim these things have been falsified. They don't offer us experiments or tests by which they say, you know, in all fairness, this could be proven false if these are the results of the experiment. So there has to be the mechanism to show something's false. Otherwise, can't be tested, and it's unscientific. Okay, next, Occam's razor, or simply called the simplicity concept in science. Yes, if there's two explanations for something, the simpler one is likelier to be correct and true. The one that holds fewer assumptions is just likelier to bear truth in this universe. I gave a weird example. I don't know if it's great, but I said, suppose someone's car is missing from their parking space. Well, they want to know why. So maybe one explanation is that it was towed away. Another explanation that is that it was taken by aliens. They're both attempts to explain it, but the alien hypothesis just holds so many more assumptions about things you don't know. Like you'd have to assume, if that was true, that there are aliens, that they are highly intelligent and capable of interstellar travel, that they care about cars and that they like yours. So those are assumptions that don't have to be made for the much more simple and straightforward assumption that it was towed away. Yes, malicious little green guys. I don't know, whatever they look like. I'm kind of a fan of the old, the giant oval eyes and the kind of oval shaped head, but that's fine. Okay, so what is predictability? So that's an assumption about the universe overall, that this universe we live in is orderly and that it is predictable. So based on that idea, the scientific laws, they should hold forever. Cause and effect relations that we understand, they should repeat forever. So the idea here, an example would be like gravity. It's not going to stop working tomorrow or at any time in the future. The same forces of gravity that operate now have always and always will. I noticed on the quiz and stuff when I asked this question, some people gave examples like this. Oh, the sun, it's always going to come up. But it's not the right example because it's not predicted by science that the sun will always come up, because all objects in the universe are temporary and they don't last forever, whether that's the sun, the earth, the moon, me or you, or anything else. There's entropy, which means things fall apart. So What is predicted to last forever are the underlying physical forces, though. Sun does have to do with induction, but it's not the same thing as the predictability assumption. Induction allows us to believe that the sun will come up another time in a specific day, but it doesn't hold that it will always come up because, I guess, on a more deep level induction, we know that there are physical processes having to do with the death of stars that we've seen in other cases because we've observed supernova and black holes throughout the universe using our telescopes. Thus, there's a kind of induction that tells us the sun will be destroyed, but a more local form of induction that tells us it's likely to come up at least one more time. Yes. So anyway, good. Interesting discussion there. What's the assumption of objectivity? That we can do something. What, namely? That yes, there's truth to be found, that we can find out about the universe as it really is, and we can learn it with no bias. So science believes that we're not just over here talking about our feelings and thoughts that can't be shared, that are just subjective. It's not all based off like opinions and private feelings. The thought of science is that we can learn about the hardcore reality, that we can learn about what's really out there in and of itself, and that we can discover these objective facts without bias. Okay, pseudoscience. Body of explanations that wants to look like it's science, but it's just putting on a fake appearance of science, masquerades as science, yes. So it's a field of explanations that wants to look as though it's rigorous, scientific, but it's not actually scientific because the claims aren't falsifiable. They're stated in such vague language that they could be confirmed by anything, and there's no tests that are ever offered, new tests or old tests to verify these claims or to show their experimental confirmation. So you got to think about stuff like what? Astrology, numerology, palm reading, psychics, cryptozoology. There's a whole bunch, okay? And it's sad, maybe alternative medicine. It's funny. People, they don't believe in real science, but they believe in the fake science, some of them. Hopefully not us. But what's my sign? Oh, I'm a Pisces. It's classic Pisces. Very artistic, very sensitive. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, yeah, I am a Pisces. I was born on March 17th. I don't know. Yeah, I know all the stereotypes about the Pisces, but at the same time, anybody who sees these astrological signs can probably see something of their own personality in any of them. Flat Earth theory, it's not really a pseudoscience because it's just a single claim. A field or a body of explanations has to be involved here. So OGY at the end, the logos of this thing, that's usually given as like a pseudoscientific field. Numerology, the unlucky number 13, stuff like that. Okay. Yes. So, what's next here? Pretty funny to see them conduct rigorous tests and then just get proven wrong only to rationalize their way out of the data. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Wasn't there a guy who thought he would prove it and he died in an attempt to like fire a rocket up into the sky so that he could like look at the Earth and think that he could see? Anyway, yes, it's funny. Yeah, when the experiments don't confirm it, that's when you're supposed to give it up and be like, I have the wrong hypothesis. But trying to rig experiments so that no matter what happens, you gain confirmation after a while, that's rationalization. That's ad hoc reasoning. That's not very good. Okay, well, anyway, we've got Francis Bacon. His contribution to science was the creation of what? The creation of the scientific method, yeah, and the various steps there that we rely on: observation, hypothesis, experiment, and all the rest. Empiricism. It's a classic view that science holds and that many people hold, which is that most of our knowledge comes off of the five senses and observation. Yes. Now, there's stuff on ethics and critical thinking here at the end. What's ethics? It's the study of morality and moral concepts. Yes, moral concepts, things like right and wrong, good and bad, moral and immoral, just and unjust. When we make decisions about what we should or shouldn't do, or about what's right or wrong in general, that's called moral reasoning. Some call it moral judgment. Moral reasoning, probably a better word, because it implies that there's a process before the judgment is issued. So I don't know, if a person cheated on their partner and you find moral fault with them, you say that was really wrong. You really did wrong by that person, and I think that you should, kind of make amends. You're reasoning that the action was wrong. Or sometimes you look at your own behavior. You're considering doing something that maybe is morally questionable, and you reason inside and you ask yourself whether it's right or wrong. Um, so we're all capable of moral judgment as humans. We can judge our actions, policies, actions of others, and we're subject to judgment. Okay, now 3 types of moral action. The big 3. We have morally blank, blank, and blank. Anybody know? Impermissible. Those are wrong to do. Rape, genocide, torture. Okay, sure. Permissible. Actions that are morally permitted. They're okay and they're not wrong. So picking up trash, riding a bike, chewing gum, giving money to charity, all those things are permissible. And there's morally obligatory actions required. It would be wrong not to do them. Not killing people, not stealing, not kidnapping. Okay, so those are negations of acts. There's also positive moral obligations like keeping promises, paying, let's say, after you've received a service, taking care of one's children that they have custody over. So yeah, morally obligatory acts. Moral values, those are values that we hold which are good for ourselves, but also others, and they're considered good for their own sake. Things like compassion, honesty, justice, forgiveness. Non-moral values, those are values that are more self-focused because they're only good for you. They're desired only as a means to an end, like a means to the end of becoming happy or pleased. So with non-moral values, we have like fame, popularity, wealth, prestige. Yes, and the book mentions that we should have balance and try to have both types of values, because a life that is completely self-centered is oftentimes a little unsatisfying in a deep sense over time. Let me say the conscience first here. Conscience, it's this like little inside voice, but maybe more precise. It's this innate source of knowledge about morality, about what's right and wrong. So we should listen to our conscience. In most normal people, it's there, and it's something that tries to guide us through life, making right choices and avoiding those that are wrong. The conscience that we have operates sometimes by revealing to us our moral sentiments, and these are emotions which can alert us to moral situations and make us want to do what's right in them. What's the helper's high? It's the phenomenon where you help people and then you feel good about yourself based off of that, right? There's some scientific evidence to show that dopamine receptor sites in the brain and little neurotransmitters actually release chemicals that make us feel self-assured and at ease when we help other people. So we're kind of almost induced by nature to be sociable, helpful, and kind to other people. Yes. Nice. Well, we've got, let's see, next up, the compassion. That's the ability to understand and care about other people's feelings, right? Yes. Now, moral outrage, resentment, that's kind of a pair. Moral outrage is when you witness or observe something that you think is unjust and you become upset because of it. Resentment is similar, but the only difference is that it's something that happened to you. So, yeah, like if you were a woman at a time when women couldn't vote, you would be resentful of your second-class status in society. But you could have been a man at the time that also believed that women should be emancipated and given the right to vote, or that should have women's suffrage, I should say. But it would be different because the outrage is on the behalf of others that are being mistreated, not necessarily for your own sake. So outrage and resentment, both feelings of injustice that should be addressed, but one is a little more personal. Guilt and shame, bad feelings both, but for different reasons. Guilt comes from you thinking you've done something wrong. Shame comes from you thinking that you've done something that violates a social norm. And so we can feel shame without guilt if we did something like, I don't know, socially awkward, like, I don't know, belching in like a crowded, meeting. But you might not feel guilty if you didn't have any choice in the matter, or if it wasn't necessarily a moral misdeed. Sometimes people are upset with others when they think that they're making them feel guilt. But the book mentions that sometimes this is due to a confusion between guilt and shame. Because it's probably fair to say, hey, don't try to shame me just because I did something that was socially abnormal as long as I didn't do anything actually evil or malicious or wrong. Um, Sometimes people confuse guilt with shame, and that might cause them to be a little more hostile to people that try to reveal to them the things they should be guilty about rather than shameful. There's different stages of moral development. These were discussed by Lawrence Kohlberg, the Harvard psychologist. And he thought that overall, people around the world develop morally in 3 different stages or steps. What about guilt from abusive and toxic people? Well, you mean like they're manipulating you, maybe gaslighting you or something to make you feel guilty when in fact you've done nothing wrong? Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility, and that does happen. You have to just be able to determine on your own whether or not the claim of a guilty conscience is fair, or if it's just somebody trying to attack you or to harm you. So, like many times, feelings of guilt are justified, but in some cases, there may be people who simply want to have psychological control or manipulation over you and make you feel like a bad person when you've not really done anything wrong. But what I would say is a good critical thinker can probably distinguish the 2 cases. When people are just trying to beat you up a little bit. On the other hand, I think you also know when you've done something that justifies the criticism. So just try to be aware and try to be just alert in your thinking about what the real cause of the complaint is. But anyway, yeah, you say you could break it because it's not morally wrong. Break what? I mean, if it's a feeling of shame that's not morally wrong, then you might say you can escape from the cycle of feeling abused by the person as long as they're only claiming that you've done something that is like socially awkward or abnormal. Moral wrong deeds, though, are like when you're harming others or when you're acting in a way maliciously or disrespectful of other people's well-being. So it's something that depends on the case, I guess. Moral development. You remember the names of the 3 stages? Pre-conventional, good. Then followed by conventional, and then, of course, the last is the post-conventional. And each one has a slightly different definition. Pre-conventional moral reasoning or development is when you think the morality is all just about avoiding punishment to yourself. So you just care about avoiding the penalties, punishments. This is a little more self-centered way of thinking about morality. The conventional moral level is when you think that morality is all about fitting into the norms and the standards of society. So with that one, most people will choose to stay with that because they just want to follow and not have to think too critically. The 3rd stage requires a lot of independent thought because you have to kind of weigh the facts of what's going on against your own moral principles. So the 3rd stage is post-conventional. That's when you have your own universal moral principles, which you apply to the facts on your own. And sometimes they'll even disagree with the prevailing views of society. We need post-conventional moral thinkers in order to press moral progress forward. There had to be somebody who said, you know what, everyone seems to agree that, slavery is okay, but I find it wrong for that institution to be abolished, or for people to say, it seems like the general assumption in society is that women aren't rational enough to vote, but I find that to be abhorrent, and I think we should change our laws and rules and even our constitution. So progress only happens because people make criticisms of the status quo, and you have to be post-conventional in your moral thinking because the conventional thinker is just like whatever's the status quo, by definition, it's right. Okay, now next, different types of moral theories. Moral relativism, moral universalism. The difference between those two is relativism says that morality is just relative to something. It's not universal, it's not objective. Universalism says the opposite, that it is universal, it is objective. It's the same everywhere for everyone. Now, there's 2 types of relativism that are mentioned here: ethical subjectivism, cultural relativism. Do you know what those 2 are? Ethical subjectivism says that morality is based off of just what? Each person's opinion, right? And then the cultural relativist says it's not just the individual opinion, but rather it's the society's standards that determine morality. Both of them, though, could be criticized. How so? Well, on the one hand, you can criticize ethical subjectivism because, there's going to be weird, like, deviant people that think it's good to rape, or that it's good to, I don't know, molest children. There's going to be people in society that think that, which is really messed up. But we don't want to say that's okay to them, and therefore there's no fact about it. We just disagree. We'd probably rather say no, it's evil and wrong, and that's just an objective fact. It almost grants too much respect to these different opinions to say that there's no basis to morality other than the opinion. The same with cultural relativism. I mean, there are cultures around the world, some of them, where you could be killed legally for being gay, or women can't drive or do anything on their own in public. And if children could be sacrificed some places, or cannibalism could be an accepted practice. If you think those things are objectively wrong, then cultural relativism doesn't go far enough either, because all it says is that it's wrong according to a social, cultural standard. Yes, that's right. Now, there's the moral theories. That's the last part at the very end. With the remaining, well, we have no more time. We're fresh out of time. So here's what we'll do, everybody. Just don't let me forget. We'll pick up on question 20 here and quickly just close out the last few notes on this side of the list. And then we'll return to the first half on Tuesday. So part 2 is coming up. We've made good progress here, but we'll finish it off when we get back after the weekend. So yes, that's true, Sky. That's the kind of point made here. Yeah, not to worry about time, everybody. We're good. The final will be like the others. That's also correct, Gabriel. It's just going to be a test form mailed out to you right at the beginning of our class time, and then you'll have until the expiration of class time to send in the answers. So you'll be looking at that on Thursday next week. Anyway, though, between now and Tuesday, everyone, not to worry. I'll just see you guys soon. I'm going to send off the link for the Tuesday Zoom meeting, and also whatever office hours I'm going to hold later. Don't forget to turn in your 4th homework anytime before midnight, just emailing that to me. And if you're looking to gain knowledge of any of your other scores, you can also ask me anytime, and I'll be happy to let you know. So, all right, guys, thanks so much again. I'm going to let you go for the moment, but let me do this, close of both streams. Feel free to say goodbye, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Okay, are we good to go then? Thanks again. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Okay, bye-bye. All right, and over here for the YouTube, thanks so much, everybody, once again, and take it easy. I'll be in touch. Okay, bye-bye.